Kapust. I am the executive director of an organization in Philadelphia called the Village of Arts and Humanities. Just so I get a sense, how many people have actually been to the Village in their lifetime? Anybody? Okay. So I'm really excited to be here with a panel of all local artists and change makers. We have only an hour, so we're going to cram in a lot and try to get a good amount of time for us to have a conversation with you guys. So I'm going to talk for about 10, 12 minutes, and then these guys are going to go through some introductory presentations. So I won't introduce them now, I'll let them introduce themselves. But I also wanted to kind of get something out of the way in the beginning, and that is the term placemaking. So we're here to talk about people and place and art, and over time, as especially the creative placemaking field has become very popular and somewhat well-funded, or better funded than it used to be, the terminology and also I think the practice itself has become a little problematic, and people move in the direction of renaming. So some people say, placekeeping, peacekeeping, peacemaking, there's creative placemaking, and then there's placemaking. And I want to just move away from thinking too much about the language today, although I do believe that language is incredibly important. What we say matters. And really think about this in terms of equity. So how are we using arts and culture to build places with people that are fair and inclusive, and creating upward mobility for all people. And that is not to say that we can't talk about the validity of some of the practices and some of the projects that are sort of couched underneath placemaking, but I want us to have a little faith that we all are on the same page about equitable creative placemaking during this presentation. So, the Village of Arts and Humanities, the reason this slide says through the arts is that we are a 30-year organization in one of the most disinvested neighborhoods in Philadelphia, which is saying a lot, Philadelphia being one of the poorest cities in the nation. And we use arts and culture to drive individual and community-wide self-actualization. So for us, art is a tool. And we know from many years, and from our founder, Lily Yeh, who is a great friend of the Village still and a mentor of mine, that artists can create the foundation for profound social change. When we're talking about artists, we're not talking just about the makers of things, the painters and the creators. We're talking about creative thinkers, people who are reimagining problems and reimagining responses and solutions to some of the most challenging issues of our time. We're talking about facilitation and co-creation being in these settings even greater than making and interpreting. Working with people to discover and then to act upon our discoveries, and working alongside them using your tools as a creator to build something new that people may not have seen as possible before. At the Village, we know this from a very, very long history of these creative thinkers. So our history goes back 30 years, but it even goes back before that to a man named Arthur Hall, who was brought into this neighborhood in North Philadelphia because there were huge riots going on Girard Avenue. So extreme civic unrest. He was a choreographer, a dancer, civil rights activist, and the mayor at the time said, we need to do something about the black people who are burning down our city. And they bring in this very, very well-known black artist and say, we're going to give you money from the Model Cities program, and you're going to give them something to do. So that's the kind of thinking that was going on at the time, and the pushing the problem away. We don't want this problem. But at the same time, here was the first time in that neighborhood that an artist was coming into the community development work. This wasn't, hey, can you do some performances and some dance and this and that? They didn't care. They said, work on society's issues. Unfortunately, they said, do it, without us, which is the history of the Village. So when no one was looking, a kind of miracle happened in this tiny disinvested neighborhood that has lasted this long. So Arthur made a promise to the people that he brought together through celebrating their culture and their heritage through art. He promised them that if they worked together, gang members off the streets now wearing tights, that their voices would travel across the city, across the nation, and across the world, and that was what happened. So for us, what we take from Arthur is a legacy of making promises through art and acting on them immediately. Art's a powerful tool in doing that, especially in a community where promises are broken all the time. So these people, this group, was in Ghana talking to them about their tiny little place in the world in Philadelphia. Pretty amazing, really powerful. Years later, he met Lily Ye, who was on a tenure track as a painter and a teacher at University of the Arts. They shared a belief that the aesthetic beauty around us, man-made or natural, is a human right, right? Neither of them took no for an answer, and he said, why don't you come to the neighborhood? Maybe you can do something with the brokenness in the outside environment that I'm doing with the brokenness inside all of us. And so Lily came knowing not how to build a park, not knowing how to create a mosaic, never painting a mural that big in her life. And that became this. And now this. So we're talking, and I could do like an hour on how that actually did happen, because it's pretty crazy. But a small 3 square block campus, intermingled with residents. My neighbors to my office are people who are the sons and daughters of a man named Big Man who taught Lily how to be safe in the community, how to keep people safe, and how to keep herself safe, right? People like JoJo Williams, who was a carpenter and a mason worker, taught her how to build parks. She didn't know how to do that. From Lily, we learned that lifting up the assets in the community in order to build something that creates the future that people want to see for themselves, that's how you make change. She didn't come in and say, I have a vision for how to do this. Really, really important. And over time, as the fabric continued to break, beauty came up around everybody. And to this day, that space, it's an informal safe zone. Nobody owns it. There's no signs up that say, no violence, no crime here, put it over there, that block, just 1 block over. This is a sacred space to the community, right? It's next to one of the last high-rises in the neighborhood. All of those kids, this is where they come for peace. So we have now 15 art parks and gardens, 10 buildings and 8 programs, all intentionally combining art, education, and community development. The way that we work is reflective of this history of artists embedding themselves in communities over long periods of time to feel, see, and hear what's needed and wanted, not make assumptions. Again, we always start with a question or a challenge. We always bring art in to creatively research. It's really important in these areas, whether you're rural or urban, if you've been researched on consistently, data's been collected, you've been studied, how do you bring art in a way to do that that is humane, respectful, interesting, rooted in discovery without, I want to prove this thing that I suspect might be true? And we ideate, we prototype, we evaluate, we iterate. We continue that as a spiral that goes usually way deeper into some of these really difficult problems. We formalized this in honor of Lily and Arthur into a program called Spaces Artist in Residence Program. We bring visiting artists. They can be local or they can be from another city like Richmond, Virginia, these artists that I'll talk about. We bring them together. Everybody is paid equally. Artists in the community, we call them neighborhood artists, who are not necessarily artists in the way you may think. They're people living in the community that want to be engaged civically and creatively. And we bring them together with these visiting artists. They work together for 4, 6, 9 months, investigating a question that has emerged from the community itself. For example, how can we transform the narrative of reentry? In Philadelphia, 2 in 5 residents has a criminal record. In our neighborhood, it's 3 in 5. Every single young person out of 400 young people in our youth program have either a neighbor or a family member who's been incarcerated or is incarcerated. So this is a really big problem and nobody solved it. So how do we bring the people who have experienced it, the experts, together with people who can help them, free them up of the daily, rigmarole, the daily hustle, and get them to be able to think creatively about the problem and act. So People's Paper Co-op was designed. It is a business that sells books and handmade books and paper, but it emerged from a project that looked at how we can take the social service environment and bring culture and creativity into it. So we have expungement clinics in Philadelphia where you can expunge a criminal record. When you come into one of our expungement clinics, you're surrounded by artwork, you're welcomed by a person who has been impacted by the criminal justice system, and you can print out your criminal record after you've spoken to a lawyer for free, which usually costs hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of dollars. And you can print out a copy of your record, you can pulp it in a blender, you can create a new sheet of paper, you can take a photo of yourself embedded in the piece of paper and create a reverse mugshot, all in one sitting or one visit. But what's really cool is that this becomes an organizing and an advocacy project too. A sterile social service environment provides an opportunity for people who think that they're alone in their reentry to recognize that their voice alongside hundreds and hundreds of these reverse mugshots is super powerful. They can vote out back judges. They can change the way that they are treated as human beings. They also run an internship program, they have a storefront, lots and lots of services. I want these guys to be able to speak, so I'm going to leave you with a recent project that was just funded through Art Place. We did a lot of research into where the places and people of power in the neighborhood are, and how do we network them, and how do we build the civic power in the neighborhood in order to drive change. Not just a seat at the table for us as artists or community members, but how can they drive it, right? And if our neighborhood is one of sort of the last frontier, not gentrified neighborhoods, how do we get ahead of, of the problems, or the designs made on a community that set the stage for displacement and gentrification? We do that by fueling civic power. Teaching, learning, and practicing civic power. So we're creating an actual facility and a program that builds the civic power of our neighborhood called the Civic Practice Studio. And as we build it, I would love for anybody and everybody who has ideas or questions or thoughts to participate. But again, a discovery that came out of these partnerships between artists and neighborhood residents, that traditional community development solutions are not uncovering or answering. Discovery is so important, and I hope that today we can talk a little bit about that as well. It is not a traditional stream of funding in the arts world or even the community development world to ask for money for discovery. How do we learn and respond quickly to what we know is needed? And so that's kind of where the village is today, and if you look back in history, it's really what we learned from decades and decades of really powerful, creative thinkers and activists before us. So I'm going to let these guys present some of their amazing work as well. Keep any questions you have, and we're going to get right into them afterwards. All right? Ready?